Hi, everyone. It's Matt. My name is the real Slim Shady. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Stranick, Dr. Matt, and I'm here for episode 3.0 of the Ed Non-Tech podcast with my esteemed friend and colleague, Dr. Doug, who's over on the East Coast. I'm coming to you live-ish, somewhat live, somewhat synchronously, as it were. So, coming to you from Kamloops, British Columbia. Doug, you were in Charlottetown, right? You're actually within the city proper, or
Nope, I can see the ocean. I'm a few minutes outside.
okay. So when you refer just to your community or your area, if you were to run into somebody, one of your friends, say, and they're like, well, where are you? What part of the island or what part of town? What would you tell them?
It depends on the friend. Some friends I'd say, oh yeah, I'm in Nova Scotia still. And
Oh,
other
some of
friends I'd say I'm in
those
Canoe Cove.
friends. I got some of those friends. It's like, I hope you are well and not in jail or otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
So
fair
Canoe
enough.
Cove. Canoe Cove is where I am.
Canoe Cove. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. You don't need to go any further. I'm not going to ask you your postal code. You can
I
Google.
don't know it.
You
I
can
have
Google.
seven different postal codes so far in 5 months.
Man, I'd be like writing myself post-it notes, or I'd be having annoying memos on my phone if I had to keep track of that many. That's well done, my friend.
Well,
A sign
I'm
of
on
a
a
white.
Mac. I'm on a Mac, and there's a little app called Stickies, and it's been around since the 80s. And so you leave electronic post-it notes on your desktop, and
That's a
it's
highly digital uh, presentation of what is ostensibly an analog format.
yeah,
I like it. I like it. I like the little thing in Microsoft Word where it looks like a floppy disk from the 90s, and you
yep.
press on it. I like those. I don't know. They're anachronisms, sort of.
If I had known, I have one in the room right there. I have a couple of floppies that aren't so floppy from the 90s,
Some floppies that aren't some perfectly fine, firm
not floppies.
floppies, unfloppies.
Yeah.
The floppylessness overruns the dwelling.
Or the
So,
non-floppy, the computer
Doug,
non-floppy.
Doug, I had so much hope for the beginning of this. Let's steer it back. I will try and
Okay.
steer it back. I'm totally the cause of the diversion.
If,
So,
could you do the acknowledgements? Because you did
yeah,
it really
yeah,
well last time.
absolutely. So I guess just one thing that's important for this podcast, as opposed to kind of silly, is that Doug sort of did some investigating, and I'll let him speak to this. But he came up with a preferred term or a more specified sort of way of speaking to the indigenous territory which he occupies. And I placed some resources for this in the show notes. I'll just again quickly say that I am, as always, immensely grateful and honored even to live and to be able to practice to do what I do here in Secwepemcúlecw, the home and the indeed ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. And again, as before, we're just trying to speak, holistically within this podcast. So, I think it's important that our acknowledgments grow and that our understanding of what it means to be, an uninvited colonial, person in these lands, so it's again, you don't want to just sort of put a stamp on it and congratulate yourself, okay? So anyway, Doug, you have much more put much more thought into this than I've given you credit for, so maybe I'll just turn it over to you.
Well, thanks for that. So I'm on Epiquit, which is Prince Edward Island now, within the Mi'kmaq, the ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And I apologize if I butchered that pronunciation, but that's what I found when I looked up how to pronounce it, because names are important, and people's names are especially important, and I wouldn't want somebody butchering my name. So I apologize if that's if I butchered that.
I'm sorry, Doug. I don't want to barge into your intro because I
No,
know
no.
they have more to say. But I mean, just having done a great number of name butchering in my time, in Qatar, I was there for 6.5 years, in Korea, and just even as a person in 21st century Canada, it's like, it's like, oh, don't be so sensitive about it. It's like, yeah, people should be friggin' sensitive about it. This stuff does matter a lot. And again, I appreciate Doug kind of repping, I guess, from the East Coast, because Mi'kmaq territory, is throughout Eastern Canada, Eastern United States. And where Doug is going with this, I believe, is that he's sort of differentiating now his particular area within the larger Mi'kmaq, culture and group of nations, as it were. Again, apologies for not using the terminology, and I'll just throw this out here once more. And then I'll really be done with it. There's a couple of excellent resources which I found today. One of them I use, I know about. I don't use it as much as I should. Firstvoices.com. Doug, I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's a really comprehensive language preservation effort by something like 70 indigenous, I believe they're all Canadian languages that are, that are still existing, and it's to promote usage and language survival. And I've got a link to that in the show notes. And the other is that in terms of actually your particular area, who you identified and who I've already forgotten the name of, man. But there's an excellent website about, devoted specifically by and for that, group, apparently within Mi'kmaq, unceded territory in Prince Edward Island. So again, those resources are in the show notes. I will totally stop talking and allow Doug to finish up his intro and or respond.
Sure. Okay. We're only 9 minutes in, and Dr. Doug Reed from the
esteemed Dr. Doug Reed.
Okay, I'll take that too. I'm actually Baron the Dr. Doug Reed. I have a patent of nobility from Sealand, that little micronation off the coast of the UK.
Are you actually serious, man?
Yeah. Yeah. So
I don't know what to make of this information, but I'm deeply impressed.
It's that I'm ridiculous sometimes.
And I'll tell you
what. I have credit cards.
And I'll tell you what. Speaking of me learning things later on in my life, Doug had the awesome concept for the show: lifelong learning and technology. So there we go. And I think actually, if you're talking about lifelong learning, you are inherently and implicitly talking about terminology, conceptual clarity, all of these things that we've sort of gotten at the first, episode, 2.5 episodes in. I think what we have now is maybe a good basis for that kind of discussion. You've started up a document with some further topics and titles and things. So maybe, Doug, you just speak to, why this topic and what was significant about it for you to suggest it today.
The big picture is it matters. It matters to me. And I know it matters to other people. When the European Union has a commission and comes up with, here's why lifelong learning matters, then it's important to a whole pile of people. And what I found is it's now, it's branching off in different ways. And some of the ways I don't care for as much as others. Like there's one way that it's become about economics. It's about, this will help your earning potential. And it's like, I don't care about that at all. Like Matt, I am betting now this year you have learned a lot about football that you may not have known 6 months ago.
If I may, I'm learning all kinds of stuff about the culture of football. And I'll tell you again, as somebody who really kind of eschewed sports when I was a younger person, um, first of all, again, I'm so amazed and respectful of my kids for embracing these things as much as they have. But what I'm really learning about, and what some of my friends who are more keyed into it, John Bowie, hockey, I'm talking to you in Fredericton, my dude. He's my best friend since I was 5. And what he's been telling me his whole life in various ways is that sport really is about culture first. And if it's a healthy, vibrant culture like we're lucky to have with the sports my kids are involved in, then, it all sort of zooms around and hones in on, the game, the phenomena, the moment. After this, Doug, I'm going to go sit in the snowing, cold, and dark at Tournament Capital Center to watch one kid play football, and then the other kid is going to be on the field directly adjacent, doing football practice for Pee Wee. I don't really, I didn't expect this kind of thing when I was when I was younger. But you're right. I'm learning all kinds about the culture. I still can't tell you how many downs are necessary to, get the thing. I can't tell you any of that. Okay, swell. One more thing I know about football.
Three is the answer.
So we're talking metaphors and ed tech. So I think that whole segue there about my kids and their sports was only slightly off track. So thank you for the opportunity to highlight, bud.
And I don't think it was off track at all. Because if you take a look at lifelong learning and technology, you're learning a bunch, but look how you're learning it, right? Like how much organization is happening through like electronic media. If you don't have a Facebook account, how do you get to Facebook to see what's going on there? Or is it an online database? Or do you have to do it through some other social media or go to that web page, or the technology's there and you got to use it. There's no option. Is that a fair comment with what's going on?
I do think that's a fair comment. It's exclusionary, and it's concerning how exclusionary it is. But I got to tell you, in as much as the culture of sport goes, what I would say is that the advantages of having something like Team Snap, or one of these scheduling and messaging apps, make it so the conveniences for me, outweigh the, costs. And I guess that's because I'm a privileged middle class dude with, pretty good amount of resources on my credit card, which, but I mean, I know ultimately this convenience is directly correlated to privilege. Okay, so if we're talking about naming and we're talking about what we want to call things, I think, speaking to it through an equity lens, and equity includes economic and I would say even technological literacy, really, access to technology and the requisite skills to use it. I mean, I think you'll agree, Doug, the phone is completely useless. It's just a friggin' rock, a highly expensive rock made of composite metals from Africa, which, if you don't really know what the function of it is, or don't have the literacy to use it, then how is it different even than a rock, right?
Yeah, and one of the references I looked up, the Eon and Malberg, the 2021 Lifelong Learning in the Internet, who benefits from online learning, and they talked about what you just said. Right? It's for some reason, the powers that be have focused everything on the individual. It's your responsibility to figure out how to use technology. It's your responsibility to find the money to buy that cell phone or buy the tablet or whatever you're using. And it's all about your responsibility. The larger society has said, no, that's not working. And the structural inequities are still there. It's the digital divide all over again.
Can I speak to that? Thank you. The digital divide and structural inequities. There are First Nations in Canada that don't even have like drinkable, potable water. Okay, they live under a permanent water advisory. There's like asbestos in some of these, 1950s and 60s buildings. And, these are places where wireless, may not even be an option. You may be dealing with dial-up internet, or you may not have any. And again, the divide as such, I mean, this is an example I think that's meaningful in our country. Rural and I would say, indigenous communities are, being excluded disproportionately because of the things that you just mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, it's how do we do it? Because right now it's not working. And like the research was awesome. The research says what they did in the past didn't work. And they haven't changed their focus, so they're just doing more of the same stuff they did in the past. And guess what? It's not working again.
Well,
this is not rocket science or rocket surgery or anything complicated.
So let's dial this into something personal here. Then I mean, what was, I guess, was there a triggering moment? I mean, I hate that word triggering. It's been, abused by a lot of people. But what was the motivating incident, if there was one, or the motivating cognitive moment for you that got you onto this topic for today?
20 years ago, I was doing my master's at University of Calgary,
okay,
and I got a chance to teach.
Awesome.
Online, but it wasn't online. It was supposed to be online, but it was on the radio, and I taught people in the Yukon. And it was, there was a whole bunch of educators, and these little communities in the Yukon are tiny, right? And so they would all come together, and I taught people in 6 different communities, and the radio was what they had. They didn't have internet that was good enough. They had internet, but it wasn't great. That was 20 years ago. So I literally sat in a little room, put the headphones on, and there was a person on the other side of the window from me, and he plugged in the cords like you see from the 1950s movies, where, you want that radio? Okay, or that person on the line, here, let's plug this in and take that out. And I was like, if I wasn't here doing this, if we didn't have this radio, these people wouldn't learn what they needed to learn to help their students. And that changed my life. And part of the life changing for me has been after I finished my PhD. I promised myself I would never take another course that had an exam, because I hate exams. But in the last few years, I've become more of a lifelong learner, because I'm an expert learner. People have told me that repeatedly. I learn stuff. That's why I'm a meditation instructor. That's why I have my license to fly drones or quadcopters or whatever. I have all these licenses. I'm a certified yoga instructor.
What's the opposite of that? Like the 100% opposite. Like the person who people are like, dude, you don't seem to learn much, and when you do, it takes a long time. I mean, that's me. So I just like now, anything we can sort of do to add to the dynamic within the show. We've just sort of got Doug, who, performs and, has the ability to kind of take these tasks and sort of move through the steps, in such a fashion that he accomplishes that with great efficiency. Whereas me, my process, anybody who's ever worked on a team with me will tell you, is not always efficient at all. It's very messy. It's very iterative, and it's the kind of in a very, it's intelligence of a different sort than what Doug is describing.
Do you want to know? I have a great metaphor for this. Okay, it's like when you look for research funding. I hate doing that too. I hate begging people for money. That's not my thing. And the research funding bodies, a lot of people now, what they seem to be doing is they do the research and then go get the funding for it based on their preliminary, but really the research, because they already know where the answers are. And I read a thing years ago. This person described it as it's like whales. Whales know where the food is. That's why whales migrate to where they migrate. They know where the food is. And us doing research, and the way you just described your learning, is the fractal random walk of ants. Ants walk in a certain fractal way to try to find food because they don't know where it is. And that's what you're doing. You're finding your way. And so it's just a different way to do things.
Okay.
So I think that's awesome.
Well, okay, so I just, yeah, this is not going to translate well on my thing. I've definitely added these statements, Doug, to the show notes. Okay, whales find food. Okay, that's.
Yeah. Whales know where the food already is. They don't have to find it. They know where it's going to be.
As a West Coast resident, dude, I appreciate that. I know we got whales in the Bay of Fundy and whatnot, but okay. And the other phrase here that's jumping out at me now, the fractal walk of ants.
The fractal random walk.
The fractal random. Okay,
and that's the important word there.
And it's very unlike me to leave out a word like random, because that's a word that I tend to gravitate towards as per,
But
science.
you just described how some lifelong learners do things. And it's like, for me, I needed to, like, when I was a teacher, right? Sometimes it takes like 9 months for that child to learn 3 times 3. Right? There's not a lot of joy in my life when it takes 9 months for that kid to figure something out that everybody else figured out in October. So I started woodworking, and I make a lot of firewood. Right? I start trying to make something, I end up with firewood, and eventually I end up with something like a chair or a table or entertainment unit, whatever. But I went online, and part of what I wanted to talk about was the different types of resources out there, the different types of technology. Most of the people that do online, like how to do woodworking, they're woodworkers. That's what they are.
Dude, you are doing a fantastic job of steering us on topic, and I will just say here that what you're referring to, these videos or these, like. My kids, anytime they want to know how to do something, they just find the appropriate YouTube video. So, I mean, it's like this, what do you call it, just-in-time resources? That's a phrase from instructional design, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And when I was doing my, doctoral study on these MOOCs, right, these massive so-called open courses, which, went in and out of vogue, and people have said that they're dead, except maybe they're not, and this and that. But I'm not even going there. What I'm just going to say is that a lot of those courses, just to speak to your point on who takes them, right? You're talking about woodworkers take the woodworking courses, whereas like the people who took these MOOCs by and large, and, through what they told me in surveys and other formats, is that people who are educated take those courses, people who already have like, a BA. It's like, educated people who are, knowledgeable about learning in general. So I think, to take it back a little bit more, what I think we could sort of make a suggestion towards is more digital literacy within K-12 curriculum broadly, and even like the equivalent of that within colleges and universities. Like, you must show X, Y, or Z competencies in this. I hate these forced, classes just as much as anybody. But like, you shouldn't be able to do it unless you can prove your access and knowledge of these tools, because otherwise you'll be at a disadvantage. There should be, honestly, it should just be part of the enrollment process. It should be like, demonstrate your access to these resources and capability of using them. And then, if you don't want to keep people from being out of it, you can just say, okay, your summer assignment before you can actually take any 4 credit classes is, go through these modules or, whatever. So
that structure already exists. We do it to students coming from countries that don't speak English as their first language. You have to take that. You have to take that English as a second language TESOL exam, and if you don't score X, you can't come in. So we already have that structure in place for other stuff.
Oh, so in terms of delivering a digital literacy thing, in a similar kind of format or whatnot.
We already have the structure and everybody accepts it. The infrastructure is in place for that.
I mean,
we don't want to do it.
It's like nobody wants to put a barrier in front of anything. What I would argue is it fair to say this curriculum is open to you? We'll take your money, we'll give you a place in the thing, but you are going to need X, Y, and Z, to meaningfully participate. And if you can't, show evidence of that, I mean, maybe we're just not going to let you in. I mean,
the other side of that is the pedagogy or the andragogy that gets provided by the educators, right? That's the other important key, because to just hop back to the woodworking thing, I follow about 40 different YouTube woodworkers, right? And I've tried to follow, and oh yeah, this one's okay and that one's okay. And then I found this one guy. His name is Rex Kruger, and he's amazing. And it took me 6 months to figure out why he was amazing. It was because he was a high school English teacher, and he's down in the States, and he ended up making more money working as a woodworker than he did as a teacher. So he's turning into this full-time thing, but he talks like an educator. He breaks it down for you.
The way K-12 people get paid in the United States is despicable. I cannot say how half-assed it is, the way that they may as well just say it. It's like, we don't value public education even a bit, and you're lucky we hire you for anything. Anyway, complete side rant there.
Yeah. So part of ed tech and lifelong learning is it can't just be the tech. There has to be the pedagogy, because if you have ever sat, I don't know if you ever sat and listened to some 65, 70-year-old guy that is like the world expert on whatever this tool is. Normally they're just boring and it's painful, but you have somebody with a bit less skill but knows how to teach and knows how to present it in a pedagogically appropriate way, and then you're laughing, right? If they know how to teach, it helps so much. And that's what we've got right now. It's like, because when you said your kids go to find the appropriate website, which one is that? That's part of the digital literacy that, especially a lot of the older people, right? That, how do we know it's online? It must be the real thing, right? This must be a good one, because when I Googled it, this is what came up. It's where is that component? Because this is a huge industry now. Like they're talking about there's been an explosion in institutions, post-secondary institutions, catering to lifelong learners that have retired, and they're moving it into whatever else in the world they're trying to learn. And it's like, if there's no pedagogy there, they lose that business. They'll go someplace better. So what are we doing?
You've got a lot of good points and a lot of good questions there, and I think it really gives us some.
Isn't that your job to answer all those? I thought you were going to answer all those.
I could try. It won't sound particularly linear or effective, but I think you're actually speaking really strongly to some of the points that you made in your notes. Just one thing I sort of made. I actually do have a list of topics that I kind of wanted to make sure that I speak to, whether in the notes or in the podcast. I'll just mention it now because we I think we've opened up a fair bit for episode 3. I just would like to give out a shout out for lifelong learning to continuing education departments across Canada. They do a lot of amazing work. There's a lot of creativity that comes from those departments. And actually, again, just in terms of the community of inquiry, pardon me, that I've sort of referred to and that I've done my thesis work on, Garrison, Dr. Randy Garrison, again, one of the main proponents and practitioners and theoreticians of COI. I mean, he worked at a continuing ed department, can't remember the institution, whether it was Red River College or University of Alberta, but he was working in a continuing ed department while that model was in its early peer-reviewed stages. He was collaborating with various folks, and a lot of, I believe, respondents to the surveys and so forth that went into even coming up with that model, which is now widely cited and used, it was from and of, I believe, a lot of it was from the continuing ed world, again, doing lifelong learning for quite some time, right? So again, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because that I felt was relevant to our discussion today, bud.
And I kick myself because 5 years ago, I had a chance. I went to a really cruddy meeting, a meeting that ended up being miserable for me. And instead, if I had not gone to that meeting, I had a chance to go to a continuing ed session at NATE on blacksmithing. And I could have spent 3 days learning how to be a blacksmith. And I really want to know how to be a blacksmith. I think that'd be fantastic.
Think of all the extra stuff you would learn, you would have to know to come out as a certified blacksmith. I mean, you'd have to know about, safety procedures. You'd have to know about metallurgy to a high degree, right? You'd have to know a lot of, physics, in order to kind of do what is necessary there. I'm picturing a sword being hammered out here. I'm picturing like a friggin' two-handed, whatever, D&D.
Yep, you're
dragon
not wrong.
slaying, monster orc slashing, Game of Thrones, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I think I want a one-handed sword because then I can hold it with 2 hands and it's not nearly as heavy. Like those other ones are like 15 or 20 pounds and that's just too much. Or 10 kilos.
Dude, you're taking this into some new waters here, my friend.
I played D&D a lot growing up, a lot.
I played it about this much and I enjoyed it a lot. So. We got overlap. We got more of Venn diagrams coming up here, or we got one Venn diagram that's becoming more multifaceted. Doug, I'm feeling like we've really opened up a lot on this topic, and I'm also mindful of time, and I don't want to make this sound perfunctory at all. My kids' kickoff is in about 15 minutes here.
Oh yeah.
So.
I'm coming back to this topic later on, though. We're going to talk about this more.
Well, I'm glad that we are, because I think this is definitely something where we can go part 1, part 2, and quite a lot more. I think we've done a good job today of sort of raising, the importance of lifelong learning in general. And I think that in itself is significant, particularly given the tech, which is increasingly used to deliver that. And we have
the tech can be positive, can be a positive impact or a negative impact. So it depends, and we'll explore that at a later date.
And a lot of that, and a lot of that comes too from Doug's, very important, I think, focus on, again, naming things appropriately, speaking to things respectfully, setting a climate in which learning can successfully take place. Which, again, if you want to talk about affecting how technology is going to, work, having a positive, respectful learning environment, I think, is key. So again, thanks for getting us on that tip today, Doug.
Right on. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Definitely, man. Take care.
You too. Have a great one.